what has concerned me between the state and the city is all of the issues that we've had pre-pandemic, and then see how they're going to deal with them post-pandemic.
We're here today with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. Full disclosure, I've known a Borough President for practically all my life. We are proud card-carrying members of the Bold Brotherhood.
Yes.
You've been a busy man. I've checked out your Instagram and your social media, and you've practically been everywhere. But my first question for you is, personally, how are you dealing with the pandemic?
Well, personally, my family has been fine. My wife's family is fine, except for the fact that my sister had the COVID-19 for over 2 weeks, but she's already on the opposite, on the end of that, and she's doing great as well. So I'm happy, and I thank God that my family's okay physically and health-wise. At home, this is like the sanctuary, right? At home, my wife and I, who are empty nesters, I'm reading books. I've been able to get a chance to finish out some books like Laws of Human Nature. I just finished reading John F. Kennedy's Profiles in Courage. I started the Book of Why. So I consider myself an avid reader, but under normal circumstances, I don't get a chance to really dive in books the way that I would love to. So this is giving me that. The benefit has been that. It's been giving me that ability to be home and early in the mornings to read. I also have a mini Nintendo console with all the games in it. So I don't know, I'm one of those 80s babies, and, so the Nintendo games, I've been walking down memory lane and playing Nintendo. I've been binging a lot on Netflix and Hulu and certain series. Hilda and I have been watching a lot of movies. So with that regard, and I've been able to catch up a lot with some of my personal friends and family members. So personally, I have to admit, it hasn't been that bad. Hilda is an essential worker. She works at the airport. She is an assistant chief of operations. But whenever she's home, we've been able to sort of, make the best of it. Our sons, one is in Germany in the Army. We haven't seen him other than on FaceTime, but we haven't seen him in over a year. And our oldest son lives in the West Bronx, so we've seen him here and there. So personally, thank goodness everything is okay.
So, as the borough president, what does a day look like to you?
Professionally, as the borough president, it's the other side of the coin. When you look at the fact that the pandemic has come into the United States, it's stormed through the state of New York, and in the state of New York, obviously New York City has been hit the hardest. Per capita, the Bronx is the eye of that storm. So per capita, we surpassed 3,000 deaths, and those are only confirmed COVID deaths, and we've seen over 40,000 people test positive. 36% of the people who have been tested has tested positive. So we've tested north of 100,000. We've done good in that area. And so our hospitals that were already underfunded, many of our hospitals who didn't have the equipment initially in the last weeks of March and throughout the month of April, it's been really, really tough making sure that they get the PPEs and the equipment and the attention that they deserve. And then now we get into that area now where the curve is going down. but we're dealing with so many other issues, like unemployment, like food insecurity, people worried about their rents and what happens there. Obviously, education has always been challenging in our borough. You could imagine how this has exacerbated the educational situation and climate. So my job as the borough president and my team, what a day looks like, it's multiple conference calls with the city of New York and the mayor's team. The borough presidents, we have weekly personal calls with the mayor himself, multiple daily conference calls with the governor's team, and just trying to coordinate with all of the presidents of the hospitals. For me, I do that every 3 or 4 days. The precincts, the chief of police, elected officials, the disbursement of supplies, hand sanitizers, face masks, food, trying to get corporate America, trying to get the food industry in Hunts Point to also be involved. We can dive into that a little bit. So on a daily basis, it's a lot of communication and coordination. That's what it's been like.
In a time like this is a civics question. In a time like this, how does the borough president office operate?
It's completely different. So physically the office at Borough Hall is closed, but all of the staffers, the whole team everyone is working remotely. And you could, when people think of the pandemic, they only think of illness, or they only think of particular silos of issues. In the Bronx, when I say we in the eye of the storm, we've been hit in every single silo or separate issues. So on a daily basis, look, when you speak of um, domestic violence issues, or dealing with the police department. So we have my director deal with that. What's happening as more and more people are flocking to parks. So we have our director with that. You still have senior citizen issues, nursing homes, right? That's like the petri dish for the COVID virus, where so many of our seniors are dying. And I have 46 nursing homes in the Bronx. So my director of senior services has been coordinating that with PPEs, and so on and so forth, health, and our hospitals. So on a daily basis, even though we're physically not in the office, everybody is extremely busy and in constant communication, whether it be with, again, the healthcare industry, the food industry, trying to coordinate with them, the police department, the parks department, sanitation, and making sure that they continue to pick up garbage and clean up areas, even during the pandemic. What you look at, there's still a lot of planning that happens in our borough. So my planning division. So we are coordinating constantly just to make sure that we're providing the type of services as best we can to the people of the Bronx, especially those in most need. For me, as the borough president myself, so I wake up in the morning. Obviously, there are a lot of emails, there are a lot of messages, there are conference calls, and then I'm known to be hands-on, Rick. So I like to go out there and not only coordinate via telephone or Zoom or Skype. Obviously, we always doing interviews and videos to get the message out, but I also like to go out there and make sure that the food is being delivered, that it's packaged the right way, that we're distributing it to who needs it, that the masks, the hand sanitizers. So I'm out there, as you mentioned in my social media, I'm out there not only coordinating it, but then trying to put a face to some semblance of hope to the people out there in the community by being physically there.
You mentioned the police department, and there's been a lot of pushback around the city, um, especially in Brooklyn, on how um, police are enforcing the social distancing um, rules. How would you say the Bronx is dealing with that? The Bronx, like the Bronx Police Department. How do you feel like they're doing?
It's fitting that you asked that question because I was just late to get on the Skype with you. And the reason why I was late is I've been on the phone with my team. I was just on the phone with the chief of police there. And look, the videos that we see are unacceptable. And we know that the way social distancing is being enforced, it's been more aggressive in some neighborhoods than in others. In other words, you have many different communities who are congregating, who are violating the social distancing ordinance or executive orders. But yet the way that police are approaching Black and brown neighborhoods has been a little bit more aggressive. Well, not a little bit, more aggressive than what you see in other communities throughout the city of New York. And that's a problem. That is an issue. And it's been more of an issue in other boroughs. But the reason why we've had these conversations prior to me getting on the Skype with you is because we wanted to get ahead of it. So we are coordinating now a conference call for the next couple of days with all of the Bronx elected officials and the chief of police in the Bronx. It's important, it's critical. Number one, we don't want the police department, obviously, to police people in such an aggressive manner. And when it does happen, we have to give it focus. So we need to make sure that we lower the temperature, because the focus that we need to give to those who are infirmed, those who are dying, those who are being infected, people without an income, people with food insecurity. I think that that's where our focus really needs to happen. Obviously, whenever there's aggressive policing or abusive policing going on, the media and everybody has to put an eye on that, a spotlight on that. So I suggested to the chief, look, let's all get together. Let's get ahead of this so that we address it, so we can minimize it, so it doesn't happen, so that we can all point our focus to the things that we need to really address right now. And so that conversation is happening in the next 2 days with a conference called Elected Officials of the Bronx Only, with the chief of police in the Bronx. But there's no doubt that social distancing is being enforced much more aggressively in our communities. And look, it shouldn't be the case. Right now, when I clap at 7 o'clock, like many New Yorkers and many Bronxites are doing for essential workers, part of that umbrella is the NYPD. And we know that for many, many decades, there's been a strain and there have been issues between the NYPD and the community. But what we want to do is, at least during this time, for the community and the police to be able to work together to get through this pandemic. Those images, those videos are not helping the cause, whether they're happening in other boroughs or not. So we're going to address that, and hopefully the police will understand that as you move forward, yes, we need to do social distancing, and the community will understand that they also have to participate, but it has to be, done in a way where you are recommending, whether you're suggesting, where you're communicating it from a space and a spirit of concern, and not one where you're just attacking, or where a particular community feels like they're being unnecessarily attacked and harassed.
Are there any things that are happening in the Bronx that you feel are not being highlighted, that are not being addressed in the media?
Well, a few things. Look, a lot of the things that the media talks about generally that's happened throughout the city, the state, and the United States when it comes to hunger, when it comes to poverty, the vicious cycle of income inequality and poverty and the lack of health benefits. You hear about this all the time in political talking points, and you hear about it now on the whole pandemic conversation in generalizations. Those are things that existed in the Bronx pre-pandemic. So the pandemic is, to a degree, just shining a light on the issue. But there's still so much that needs to be done to equip our hospitals. There's still so much that needs to be done to afford people the health care that they deserve. There's still so much that needs to be done where we need to address where the immigrant population falls under that. And how are we dealing with our senior citizens at large and in general, but also more specifically in our nursing homes? Why is it that the seniors at the nursing homes are dying at a higher clip when we know that they don't go anywhere? So how is the COVID coming in, and why we haven't really done anything to focus on the workers or the faculty who are obviously the ones bringing it in and infecting those individuals? You look at when I said early on, I said confirmed cases of deaths, but how many people are dying in their homes from COVID, but they never been tested for COVID? So therefore, they're not necessarily being categorized as dying from COVID. That needs to be addressed, right? We need to have more and more testing. We need to, deal with rents. The people talk about a furlough in rent or a moratorium on rents, and how you can't be evicted and you don't have to pay your rent for another 2, 3, now they're saying up to 5 months. Well, you know what? All that's doing is for the tenant is that it's accumulating 5 months worth of rent when they are not getting 5 months worth of salaries. So we need to cancel the rent, or we need to find a way for the federal government to bail out the tenants by paying their rents to their landlords. But it makes absolutely no sense to say, oh, you don't have to pay the rent now, but 3, 4 months from now, you're going to have to pay all the back rent. Well, you know what? They didn't have all of that income coming in. They'll start being able to pay the rent from the day that they start to work again. So these are all the things that, health indicators. We've been trying for many, many years. Just a few years ago, we had Legionella in the South Bronx. And everybody knew that people with pre-existing conditions were mostly affected, and the ones that were at high risk of fatality from dying of Legionella's disease. That was at a micro level. And back then, we talked about asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, other respiratory ailments. We've been talking about this ad nauseum for years. So, for me, these are the things that still haven't been addressed, and these issues should not be swept under the rug once we're able to defeat COVID. These are the issues that we have to continue to have a conversation about moving forward. So should and when we get another pandemic that hits us in the future, at least we have a better fighting chance to reduce our fatality numbers.
Outside of being bailed out, small businesses, since there's been a huge controversy of larger companies getting the aid, and smaller businesses not getting what they need from the bailout. Um, do you feel like there are any strategies that are out there that small businesses can use in order to ensure a reopening when this is all said and done?
So specifically on our end, we work with the Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation, and we started something called the Bronx Business Continuity Loan Program. But it's a loan program, and it helps for payroll expenses. It's a loan that could help pay for commercial and mortgage rents and leasing of equipment. A lot of businesses have equipment that they lease. They still got to pay for all of that, that monthly lease, but they are closed down over these several months for insurance. And the loan is up to 2-year loan. It's at zero interest. It's from either from $25,000 to up to $100,000, and you don't have to start paying it until 90 days after you receive the loan. But we could only do but so much. The federal government, I think, when their last stimulus package got it all wrong, and by bailing out airlines who make billions of dollars, airlines who, by the way, still have many of our money of people who purchased a ticket They don't refund you that ticket. They just give you they allow you to get a trip further down the road. Well, a lot of people need that money now to pay for food or something, right? And yet the airlines have that money. And the federal government is still bailing them out. When you look at some of the national steak, and I like me a good steak every now and then, but the steak chains where they have millions and millions of dollars that they can fend for themselves. I think that the strategy has to be for the federal government to step it up and make it much more reasonable, streamline the application programs, and also have much more of a direct communications with small businesses where the pandemic has hit the hardest, like the Bronx, like New York City.
How would you say the relationship is between the borough, the city, and the state? City Hall, Albany.
I think that when it comes to the state and Governor Cuomo, I think he's done an amazing job, an exceptional job. I've had in a relationship with him personally for many, many years. Every time that when you look at the Renaissance pre-pandemic, a lot of that has been with his support, with the state assembly support under Carl Hastie. The mayor and I don't share the same type of relationship, but during this pandemic, I can't complain. Every time that we call, we have a conversation with City Hall, whether we need to or the state, where we needed testing locations, driving, walking in every corner of the borough, we've received them. Every time that we've been able to advocate for our hospitals, be them public or private hospitals, Montefiore to Lincoln Hospital and all of them in between, for PPEs, everybody has stepped up to the plate. When food, hand sanitizers from the state. I mean, masks for the community. We've been able to get all of that. What has concerned me between the state and the city is all of the issues that we've had pre-pandemic, and then see how they're going to deal with them post-pandemic. So not everybody's saying, "Oh yes, once upon a time, I was trying to fund as many tablets to our public school kids, and OMB and the city of New York didn't think that was a good idea, so they wouldn't let that funding go through. Over the last year and a half, they've allowed for us to be able to purchase, the Chromebooks and all, the tablets, but we're behind the ball when it comes to that. Throughout the years, we've been talking about telemedicine. Throughout the years, we've been talking about how is it that we bring more affordable, healthy foods and make them readily available to the community. Throughout the years, we've been talking about making sure that we give people a decent salary with health benefits, because we know that then that's how they're better able to take care of themselves. And in a time like this, then their immune system and their health will help combat whatever diseases or infection may be out there. When you speak of harassment of landlords with their tenants, but that's still going on right now during the pandemic. So my point is that everybody's talking a good game now, pandemic. When it comes to assistance, when it comes to attention during the pandemic, we're getting that. I would be less than honest. Could we always receive more? Yes, but this is an unprecedented time, and everybody needs more, right? It's just such a huge problem that COVID has presented to everyone, and quite frankly, no one saw it coming. My issue is going to be with the city and the state. How is it that once this all calms down, that we're really going to address health disparities? How are we going to address income inequality? How are we going to address just food insecurity, and so on and so forth? What protocols are we going to have in place should and when something like this happens again? And what should we be doing so that when it does happen again, we're in much stronger shape? That's going to be the real test.
Now, during a time like this, we're seeing a lot of misinformation being disseminated. some of which that leads to bad behavior, right? Um, we haven't seen any sort of protests in the Bronx, but there have been pushback. What are some of the things that have come to you, misinformation, that you feel, I don't want to say that you feel it's unhelpful, it is unhelpful, but when you see those things, how do you feel people are handling them?
Well, I've seen it over the last 6, 7 weeks at every level, right? Everything from the most egregious example of government ineptitude coming out of the White House, right? I mean, how many times have we heard the president, number 45, give out misinformation only to be rebutted and contrasted by the experts and the scientists and the doctors that are standing right along with him in press conferences? I mean, just about last week, he said that, I mean, that people should ingest disinfectants. That's misinformation, right? So from the top, you just see and hear all kind of ridiculousness that should not be coming out of our president of the United States. Early on, I heard a lot of the folks saying, "Oh, this infection of this disease doesn't kill people of color, Black people, Latinos." Initially, you saw that Europeans and the Jewish community was being affected by it. And those are folks that travel. Quite frankly, many of our communities don't travel to Europe. They don't travel to Asia. And so initially, you didn't see people of color being, infected. And so a lot of folks got a little cocky or started putting out there, "Oh, it doesn't affect our communities." Well, that was, misinformation that really hurt us, and we see it in the numbers, right? Um, a lot of misinformation about the amount of testing that was initially going to happen. That hurt us. Who was being affected and why? So people were saying, "Oh, if you're older, if you're sick, you'll be infected by it." But then, so we have a lot of elderly and we have a lot of people with pre-existing conditions in the Bronx. But guess what? A lot of the essential workers that are being called on to go out there and do the best that they can, whether they're EMS, nurses, people, men and women in transportation, the police department, a lot of those are minorities as well. So it wasn't just the sick and the elderly, but it was also essential workers that a lot of them, many of our people now with death toll comes from that category. And then now you see that a lot of young people, they're out there, they're congregating, and because the numbers aren't as profound when you're under a certain age, they think that they're invisible. They think that they're not going to contract it. They don't realize that they may be asymptomatic, that they're still contagious, and so they hang out with their friends. They're hanging out on the block. They're playing basketball. They're smoking out of hookahs. They're sharing a swig of something. Then they go home and they give it to their parents. They give it to their grandparents, and that's where the problem lies. So what we need to do is, as we see the numbers going down, as the weather keeps getting warmer, we need to remain optimistic, but also be cautious and disciplined, that we continue to practice social distancing, that we continue to wash our hands frequently, that we use a face mask, because that's working. But a lot of folks think that it's still a joke. Some folks think it's some kind of conspiracy. Some people may be totally oblivious because it hasn't hit home yet. Maybe they just see numbers in a press briefing by the governor or the mayor, or maybe they hear this or that, but maybe they don't have a family member that has really hit them, or a friend. And so they continue to go out there like, "Oh, people will say, well, you got to die of something one day," or, "Oh, I believe in God and it's all in God's hand." Yeah, well, I'm a Christian. I believe in God too, but God gave us a brain to think. It's not just, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. We have to think this through and And we're all soldiers in this war. Different people are doing their job. Our heroes, nurses, doctors, EMS, they're in the forefront. Police department. Some of us are out there feeding those that are hungry, but the overwhelming majority of the soldiers can do their part by just staying home. You know, it's very difficult because when you are from the Bronx or from New York, it's in our DNA that if you say let's go to war, well, you know how it is. For us, war, all right, let's go. Let's fight a war. And going to war means being present, going to the battlefield. But what we're saying, let's fight this war, but being a soldier is being absent, is staying home. And that's hard for many people to compute. That's hard for many people to understand. But we still got to keep pounding the pavement and putting more and more information out there until we totally get rid of COVID-19.
In conclusion, is there anything that you'd like to add? Is there anything that you would like to express that we haven't touched upon in this interview?
I hope that we learn many different lessons, myriad different lessons in all of this. Everything from how do we set in a protocol pre-pandemic when we know that it's happening in other parts of the world? You know, how do we shut things down and do that more efficiently? How do we set protocols during a pandemic? How do we approach it when we open up? How do we view each other differently? I know that there are so many parents who are home now and they're doing the distance learning. I hope that many of these parents realize the importance of our teachers. I hope that when things get back to some level of normalcy, when they send your kids to school, that you have a different rapport, that you have a different level of communication and respect of your teachers. I was telling this to a colleague of mine just earlier. There's so many people that you see now on the food line. I gave out 700 meals just earlier today. Many of the people on that line weren't like poor or on public assistance. These are people, many of those people were folks who had an income, who lost that income, who, let's be honest, pre-pandemic probably frowned upon and belittled the folks that they saw stand on food pantry lines prior to this, but now they find themselves in the same situation. So I hope that part of the lesson that we learn is how do we change that mentality and that psyche and how we treat each other differently, how we stop prejudging folks who of no choice of their own through circumstances, you know, through the short, a bad, luck of the draw, find themselves in a destitute and in poverty, and how do we all come together to help them out, because many of us are just 1 or 2 or 3 paychecks away from standing on that line. So it's obviously government. You want government to learn and address all of the different issues, everything from staffing of the nurses in our hospitals to equipment and so on and so forth, and technology. I hope we learn from technology, but I also hope that we learn lessons of how to treat each other and how to appreciate each other and how to appreciate the essential workers, how to appreciate people that normally pre-pandemic we took for granted.
From one PS31 grad to another, Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., thank you for your time. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And I hope to see you soon.
All right, Rick, God bless you and your family. Thank you.